Morning folks, just getting myself sorted here. I forgot to get the dominoes out before I started, so I've just been getting that sorted. Alright, now, a bit cool and chilly here, but anyway, it's quite nice, and a nice sunny day. I noticed everybody around the place, by the sound of what's on the feed, is that everybody's getting blown off the planet, except for Skip, who's got a bit of heat apparently. But we've got a nice sunny day, and it's relatively calm. So where we're up to with our little table, this is the table frame, and what I've done, we assembled that last week, and what I've done is I've added the wheels onto the bottom of it. So I've just put the wheels on, and as you can see, it moves around quite nicely. Now, one of the things that I did do was I took it in the house and I tested it with the machine on it to see if everything fitted quite nicely, and it does. So I'm really happy about that. But what I did as well is I built the tabletop for it. So I put the tabletop on like that, stuck our machine on it. That's the perfect height. It's perfect for Pam to sit under and to work on, and when you lock it down it stays quite stable. Now, one of the things that we talked about when we first initially built this was that we were going to have a drop side on it. I thought, yep, okay, that's fine. One of the things that I sort of don't particularly like to see is end grain on the end of a table, so I put breadboard ends on it. Now I've got a breadboard end on this end and I've got a breadboard end on that end. One of the reasons that I do that is because I like to have a little bit of support, particularly when you're going to add things on the end of it. So we're going to hinge a drop side on it, and the breadboard end, by having it this way, actually adds a little feature to it. That's one of the important things to it. It also gives you something to screw the hinges to, because we've got to have a number of hinges along the edge, and it needs a reasonable amount of support. Now I suppose you can get that from just having the end grain come off the end of the board, but I don't actually like the look of it. I like to see the side of the grain actually on bits of furniture that I make anyway. So you can do it any which way you want, but that's what I like to do. So the breadboard ends, I'm going to show you how to fit those, and it's a good way of sort of finalizing the end of the board. Now, when I cut this piece of timber, I had this bit left over, right? Because that's not the full length of the board that I bought. I'll just show you what the board looks like in its full length. I'm just going to get in Pammy's way with the camera there in a sec. This is what the board actually looks like. This one was relegated to seconds because it's got knots in it that don't look nice on the top of the table. Also, it's got an inclusion in the timber here that we didn't see when we purchased this piece of timber. Now these are just added pieces of timber laminated together, and what I thought was I'll just cut a piece of that, put it on there, and then the leftover bits I used that to do the breadboard ends. Then I realised I need the drop side as well, so I had to go and buy another piece. But when I bought the other piece, as you can see, they don't all match up. Here's the drop side. Now the drop side, as you can see, the grain on the boards doesn't match up, and we wanted a continuous flow of timber right along the board, so that when it was open, which is going to be like that, you've got your two breadboard ends which finalise your piece, but the grain which would continue along, and they're different colours, and that doesn't sit nicely with what I like to see in furniture, because even though it's going to be dropped off like that. The other thing I did was I made the board too long, so I had two things going against me, and I thought, nah, I'll try it again, and I'll do but I can use these because that would make a really nice top for a blanket box. Pam thinks that this might be a good charcuterie board. I think just all I need to do is round over some corners, put a little edge on it, maybe put some handles on it, do something to it anyway, and make a nice little charcuterie board.
Anti-pesto board.
Anti-pesto board, that's the one, yeah. So we thought we might give that a shot. Okay, so that explains where we're up to, but like I said, that's not going to work very well because it doesn't all match up. So what I did, I'll just get rid of one of these boards. So what I did is I went and bought a board that we liked, and this is what we've come up with. So when we, did we have it that way, Pam? I think we did.
Yeah, follow your
Okay,
numbers.
so now I numbered everything and I've forgotten which way the numbers go. Anyway, this is going to be the drop side, right? So it's only a short piece, and then in between it all, we're going to put on our boards. Now these are 60mm wide, and I've cut it all at the right length this time. So when we get the join together, we have that. But what we end up with is the continuation of the grain from one board to the next when you open up the board. It's just one of those fussy things that I like to sort of make sure that work with the piece of furniture. Yeah, just cabinet makers fussiness, I suppose. Some people call it anal retentive, but anyway. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to put all these breadboard ends on. Now, you don't have to limit this stuff to just the ends of tabletops. You can do this to any sort of furniture, benches, tabletops. I've got it on my benches around the workshop here as well. It just gives me a finalisation of the end of the board. So, and it adds a little bit of strength. The other thing it does is if something's going to warp, it's not going to move any of this sort of stuff. Now, people talk about timber movement. There are techniques involved in putting these together with just a mortise and tenon joint in here and pin it either side. Now we're not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to domino and glue the whole thing together so it all becomes one piece. So that's what we're going to do. Now dominoes that I'm going to use, they're fairly big, fairly strong. They're the factory made ones. Pretty easy to use. They're soft enough to fit nicely. They do allow a little bit of movement, but like I say, the board's not big enough to really make any large movements. But what it will do is give it a bit of strength as well. So let's get on to it. Now, first thing I need to do is I need to mark these so they're in the right place. Incidentally, make sure that you have a perfect cut on the edge of your board. Now, I used my, you could do it with a table saw. I used my track saw, and the track saw blade is a beautiful blade that cuts a perfect edge so that when we get a join together like that, we've got nice clean surfaces. You can plane them if you feel that that's necessary, if that's what you want to do. It's up to you. I just think that the cut gives enough of a rough surface so the glue has something to bond to. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to measure up and mark where my dominoes go. So everything has to line up. I have a pencil here somewhere. I had a pencil. This one I'll do. So I'm going to put 4 dominoes in. The first one will be at 50mm because I'm not going to add anything around the edge of it. The hinges will go in where they have to go. So 50mm and 100 there, 100 there. Now just line these up. And the easiest way to do this now I need a line on here that I can use for both. Just make sure when you do this you don't move it sideways back and forth, otherwise you end up, everything's out of alignment, and when you go to put it all together it won't fit.
Like
See
that.
like that. Just make sure everything is perfectly fitted. Probably needed to put a clamp on it to hold it in place, but I didn't. Everything is lined up. Here are my marks for my dominoes. I'll do the same with the other board in a second, but right now, you do one. You have to clamp that in place, just to hold it down. The clamps. Now the domino colour, what I've got, these are 8x40s, I think. Can't actually read them. They're 8x40s anyway, so I've got to come in 20mm into there. So I've got my domino. Actually, they must be 50s. I'll just check that before I make a bold statement. Yeah, they're 8x50s. So my depth of cut has to be 25mm into each. And so I have my setting here on 25. Okay, so it's just a matter of making sure that setting's right. The thickness of my timber is 18mm. Now, on the top of here, we don't have an 18mm mark. I've got a 16mm mark, which is adequate. It doesn't matter whether they're a little bit towards the top or a little bit towards the bottom, so long as they match up. Now, 16mm set there. I've got this set on square. So, just going to check that because last time I did that, I got it wrong. Okay, so now I just have to work through my numbers. And the bit that I have in there is an 8mm bit. Okay, you can see that there. And I'll be sitting that on there and then cutting it. So we've got to go through that process. Just need my dust extractor hooked up. And there we have it. See if I've got any pads. Okay, so just make sure everything is there and it's stable. That's why I've got the clamps on there. There's a nice little set there. turn the board around. Do the other way, do the other side. And so there we have our 4 dominoes, both sides, like that. It's a matter of doing these. Now when I do these, normally what I do is I will clamp a board here. I'm going to clamp a second one on. So about there somewhere. And halfway through this process, we've got to actually change the clamps around. Now, this is something that you need to, that you might investigate down the track. If you have a look at the top of the domino cutter, you'll see that you've got these 3 little sections here, right? Now I've got that turned to single, which is the actual size of the domino. This one is a little bit bigger, and this one is even wider again. So for the different things that you might be wanting to do with dominoes, what you can do is instead of working with that, you can move it along to here, which gives you a wider domino there, so it gives you a little bit of adjustment sideways if you need it. Now I don't need it, so I'm going to stay put on this one here because I've got all my markings correct. But if you have them out a little bit, you can just change the width of your domino rebate and it will give you a little bit of freedom to adjust sideways if you need to. Being able to adjust it sideways is generally something that you would do with some extremely hard timber where you've got no give in the domino itself and you've got no give in the timber. So if you make your own dominoes, which you can do, you can adjust it according to the way you make your dominoes. You can make your dominoes a little wider. These are just factory bought ones and they do the job quite nicely for what we're working with here. that there because we've got another board to do. For this one here, we'll just put this one together. I'll just show you how it goes together, and then I'll do the same with the other one. And now you can see we have the same dominoes, or the same trenches, and that board will go straight onto there. Alright, now I've done this a few times and I've done it with various people, and everybody's got a different idea of what do you do first, which bit do you put together, which bit do you put the glue in, all that sort of stuff. In my opinion, there's really no reason to be fiddling around trying to figure out why you do this bit first and that bit, when in the end that's going to be glued on there. So I don't worry too much about it, I just do it the way I feel that it's going to work for me, and the way it works for me is this. Get my brush and a piece of my little pour a little bit of glue in there. Don't overdo it, just a little bit. In each of the holes. You grab your brush and you just spread that around inside the hole. If you put too much in, it's going to squeeze out, but don't be too concerned about that because we're going to add some more to the outside of it anyway. The dominoes. Knock the dominoes in. Can't see me squeezing out, so obviously I'll put in the right amount. I need to do the other one. Same thing. If you don't feel confident with this stuff to begin with, do a couple of practice bits. The dominoes aren't very expensive, and wasting a couple of dominoes to do this, it's not going to break the bank. Just need to spread that around in the hole. More dominoes. Anyone added any words of wisdom there, Pammy, that I need to answer? No. Okay, now, here's the fun bit. What we need to do is make sure we get our numbers all lined up. So that one's going to go on there, and this one's going to go on here. And I have some clamps all set up ready to go. And so a little bit of glue. And you spread it out. Just make sure you paint the domino as well. Cover the whole surface, make sure everything's got glue on it. This one?
Yeah.
A bit more there. Okay. Now that's number one. This is number one. Now the temptation is to get the mallet and just start bashing away there, but if you do that you're going to damage the edge of your board. So get a piece of scrap, just hold it on top and hit, tap the scrap. Okay, so we've got one in. It's not quite in yet, so that's okay. What I have to do is build the other one. I've got enough time to be able to do this. Brush. Work quickly. If you work slowly, the glue's going to dry before you get out. Get the thing put together. So just work steadily, and you'll find that it'll come along. As I always say, you've got to make sure you're all set up to do this sort of stuff. Set everything aside so that you've got your glue there, you've got your brushes, something to wipe it off with, you've got the clamps set up. You get all those sorts of things set up so that you don't have to go chasing something halfway through a glue up. Pretty right there. Number two goes in there. Piece of scrap on top. So wipe off the excess glue that's just popped through. Okay, so when you've got it to that stage, it's then time to put some clamps on it. Now I have my trusty Bessie clamps here. I'm going to put it up this way. Put one on the end. Now I'm going to pull that up just gently, just enough to hold it. There's a reason for that. I'll show you in a sec. Now, if you look along here, you can see there's a gap between the clamp and the board. I don't want that gap on there because, let me turn it over, if I just did that up nice and tight, push it down on top of the bar and did it up nice and tight, what would happen was that would bend, right? Because of where the joint is. So, where the joint is, put another basic clamp on there. Stop it, and I want the timber pressed hard down on top of the bar, of the clamping bar, on both sides, just keep it flat. So now I can do that up nice and tight, and I can pull that in so that we've got no gap between the boards. Turn that around and do the other side. Now you may ask, why didn't put them on? Why didn't I lay them over on their side? I'll show you in a sec. Now we have these set up nicely. Get it up nice and tight. And when you look at this, you can see, when you come over here, Penny, you can see that the edge is really nice, clean, fitting edge. Just a little bit of sand. And then what I'll do. Now, I could have put the clamps on like that and clamped it up. But one thing I've found with any clamp, apart from a pipe clamp, is there's flexibility. You've got a thin bar, and if you do it up tight, you may get a bit of bowing this way. You got less of bowing over the top rather than along the side, along the thing. That's why I put them on that way. That's my excuse anyway. This one goes on the top side here. And I'll just pull the middle of it in. Okay, so now they'll just set aside to dry. And I need to do my second one, so I'll put this one over here. And now we do the second one. The problem with this one is it's a little bit longer, so it's going to have a little bit more of an issue when it comes to marking out. I have to do them individually. So number 3, and that's number 4. So they're going to go on there, and we'll just repeat the process. So 50mm in from the edge. It just so happened that oh, excuse me, bit of dust. It just so happened that the board that we bought. Now this is manufactured board from the Big Green store. Happened to be exactly the right. Well, it's not high enough for what I want to do. Where do I put the other one? There it is. Exactly the same width as the table we built, which is a bit of a coincidence, a good coincidence. Same on the other end. You don't have to have these evenly laid out if you don't want to. You can put them on any way you like. If you have something else that's going to interfere with fitting, or a design feature or something that you put on, you can put these anywhere you like. Okay. Couple more clamps. Domino cutter again. Make sure it's sitting flat when you cut these. I was hoping to cut some buttons, the buttons I spoke about last week, about fitting the tabletop to the frame. Hopefully we get to have a little look at it. The longer ones don't have enough short ones, especially when you've got them clamped up to a job. Again, carry through. It's a quiet day in the shop today. Okay, finished with the domino cutter. What have we got, Pam? 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Where'd I put my glue? So you all saw this process just a moment ago. Do it again. A little bit of glue in each of those. Should spread the glue out, eh? That might be a good idea. As you can see, I haven't used a lot of glue in there. The domino cutter makes a nice clean cut, so just making sure that the router bit, that the colour in the domino cutter is actually nice and sharp. The timber I'm using here is relatively soft as well. It's not a hardwood. Not quite sure what sort of timber it is, but it's pretty close to the density of camphor laurel.
I think it's called a kumi.
It's called a kumi, but I've never heard of it.
No.
So
goodness knows where it came from.
Yeah. If anybody knows what that akumi is, if it's got a common name, might let me know. So make sure you get those in deep enough. If you don't go too far in, you've got to pull it apart and then cut them off. One way to check is just sit them down like that and make sure they're all touching. So you'll do. One's not touching. Obviously I haven't gone deep enough with that one there, so I'm going to sand the end of that off. I'll sand the end of one of these off, so I'm just going to go to my drum sander, which is just my desk sander, which is in the corner there. I just want to take the end off one of these. I'll just leave a little bit of room on the bottom of the board. Okay, number 3 and number 4.
You know, when you were talking about when you were measuring out for the dominoes, you said you can put them anywhere you like, really, space them any way you like, especially when you want to avoid objects or, you know, the design of the table. In our case, we're going to put 3 hinges on the drop side, so you've got to know where to avoid the dominoes, the placement of the dominoes, don't you?
Yes. No. They're not going to interfere too much with it, but it's best to avoid them anyway. I like to make sure that I'm working with solid timber, even though these fit neatly in the hole. It's still a good idea to avoid them if you can. They are a weak point, particularly if you're adding hinges or adding screws to something. Tap to get it started. Fit. Like I said, this is a feature as well. So you don't have to use the same timber, the same type of timber to put these breadboard ends on. You can if they're called breadboard ends because they're often, you'll see on a breadboard in the kitchen or a chopping board in the kitchen. They've got different coloured ends, and sometimes what happens, I'm told that CARROLL'S probably the best timber to use for chopping boards because of its qualities in antibacterial values. But you'll often find that on the end of it there's a hardwood, and the hardwood has generally either got the handle attached to it, or there's something that makes it look a little bit pretty, a different coloured timber there. There's a lot of reasons why you see the ends of it made out of hardwood, which gives it a bit more solid function. So you can do the same to the tables. I'll just hide behind here for a second while I attach. Attach this.
It's getting higher and higher.
That's going to create a blood blister. Don't get your finger jammed between the bits of timber and the mallet. Okay, so out with the clamps. My longer version. Now, same technique. Squeeze it up a little bit. use that padding. Just make sure it's square when you do this. Over. Now you have to be especially careful with this because you have a long distance here. We don't want to bow in here. So just make sure when you clamp it up, do it very carefully. Quite nicely. I'm putting the clamp over the top of the joint. That's where I get a bit of pressure on the table itself and on the piece of timber. And final one. Okay, so that gives me my two tabletops.
So Cole, before we finish, can you show the little sample that you did for the timber colours?
Oh
The
yes, I'm
tabletop?
going to do that. Yeah,
good.
I'll do that. So I've got 5 minutes. I haven't got time to actually make the buttons. I'll show you what they look like, the way I've done them. I'll just shift this off here. So give me a few seconds. I'll just put this over here. So while I'm working with some of these things, there's often times when you get a couple of seconds where you've got, you're waiting for something to dry, or you've got a bit of time between things. I often use that time to actually experiment with some of the other functions that we need to do around the job. Now, as you can see, the timber itself, it's got quite a lot of colour in it, and the reason Pam chose it is because it's got these variations of colour, but they're very subtle. There's little red bits, there's pink bits, there's grey bits. There's a whole lot of different things going on with the timber. Now, Constantia they're the people who make, this is the Adelaide company, who make the Chinese wood oil. Now the Chinese wood oil is what I've always been using on all my boxes and various other bits and pieces. But they also make the red oil. Now, the red oil is red in colour. You can see on my piece of rag, that's what colour it is in the bottle. And where we have different timbers or different pinks and yellows and things like that, the red oil actually highlights the reds and the pinks in the colour, and it accentuates them a little bit. You can see here, I've used on here, this is where I've used the red oil. Now it's very subtle. It's not something that stands out and sort of blazes in your face or anything like that. It's just very subtle. You can see that this area here is a little bit more pink or a bit redder than this section here. Now, sometimes you can put that down to the fact that the piece of timber that's added onto here is a lot greyer, and that's what it's going to look like anyway. But this bit was done with red oil, and this bit was done with the standard Chinese wood oil. This is much lighter. When we look at it here, I don't know, oh, you can actually see it on
yeah, that's better.
When I'm looking at it on top here, you can't actually see a great deal of difference in the colour. But when you look at it this way, with that reflection that you've got on there, Pam, it's you can see this is much redder, and it just sort of makes everything stand up a little bit. So experiment with your finishes as well. And with this stuff, it's just a matter of a little piece of rag. You can put this on with a brush or a rag. You can see it's quite colourful. So it's just a matter of rubbing it in. And you can see what it does to the...
When it's against raw timber, you do see the contrast.
Yeah. This bit on this end of here hasn't been sanded, by the way. That's just straight off the shelf. You can rub it in like that with a piece of rag, let it sit and highlight. You can see the different, see what colour it is. Or you can brush a heap of it on.
Would brushing it actually be pushing it into the pores more than a cloth?
Not more, but it will do the job. So brush it on, you basically get a little bit more on there. You get a bit of bulk on there, which means it's going to soak in a bit better. So brush it around that. Make sure it's even. Yeah, nice and even layer of material. And after about an hour, I suppose, take a piece of rag and give it a rub in. Now, I didn't wait an hour, of course, but that's what I would have done. I would have left it for an hour or so, which is what I did with the other end. Now, once you've done that, let it sit, let it settle. Brush. Brush the Chinese finishing oil over top of it. It's the process that you would use for it. And let that settle. Now, I haven't done that on this one here, but I'm going to do that later. I'm just going to let that settle for a little bit longer. And but that's the process that you would go through with this stuff. And then once you're finished, once it's settled, well, then you give it a rub.
Could you actually deepen it by reapplying the red?
No, it won't. Once you've got we need to experiment a bit more, but Pam's come up with a really good question. Will it go darker with more applications?
Maybe.
Well, I don't know.
Let's try.
We'll give it a try. I'll just let that settle a bit longer. Now, this side wasn't sanded, so you can see the difference between that and this. Just because I've sanded this one correctly, I haven't sanded that bit. There is a huge difference. This has got no gloss, no feeling of finished or anything like that.
Interesting.
Whereas this side here, where I've sanded it properly, you've actually got a sheen on it. And I've done very little work to it, so just a matter of making sure that your sanding's done correctly. So we'll go from there. Okay, now one other thing I wanted to show you before we go, we've got to find it. This piece of timber is an offcut, and as you can see, the grain on the timber runs across this way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a rebate down along the bottom of that, and then I'm going to dock off pieces like this, and these are the buttons, and as you can see, I've rounded over the edges, and then with a file I'm going to file out the corners of that bit, and you can see it's pretty much the same as a button, or so as a domino, and they will go into the table like this. What they will do is they will fit like that. Now this will need a hole drilled here, and we'll just dock it off so that it's only about that long, and that's about all you need. I'll round over the edges to make them look a little bit jazzy, but they'll get painted anyway because they're part of the framework, so they'll get painted before they're actually fitted, and then we'll screw up through that into the tabletop when we put the tabletop on there. So pretty much that's all we've got for today.
Just answer this question, Cole, from Peter.
Which one is?
As you've glued the ends, is expansion and contraction not an issue on this piece?
Not particularly, Peter. This is going to be in a room that's fairly stable temperature most of the year round. Our house is quite good. If you're, as I said to you right at the beginning, the technique of actually putting dominoes in here and then pinning what they call board drawing the ends of the dominoes here and in that piece there will alleviate that problem of expansion and contraction. There isn't enough movement in this timber here because they're all little short bits to actually worry about too much. I've never had a problem with it before. Or, like I say, all my benches in my workshop here are all done this way, and I've never had anything move or split or crack or warp or do anything that it shouldn't do. Having a piece of timber with a grain across that way will stop it from warping this way anyway. So,
and it's not terribly long. They're not long pieces.
They're not long pieces anyway. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question, Pete. And
thanks to Dave Rowland, who has told us that the timber that we've got is okami, and it's found in the Congo and Gabon.
Oh,
in
okay.
Africa. Yeah.
There you go. So an African timber. I generally try to stick to Australian timbers, but this one here is quite simple and easy to get hold of, and it's quite good. It does the job. It'll look quite nice when it's finished. So anyhow, that'll be it for today. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. A few thumbs up wouldn't hurt. And we will catch you all next week. Now, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen next week. We've got buttons to make. Hopefully we'll have the frame painted. We'll be able to fit the tops. I haven't got the hinges yet. There's a couple of, they're on their way. And then we might be able to fit some hinges as well. So have a good week, everybody, and I will see you all next Sunday.